Hello and welcome everyone to this really special interview. I have Tanya with me, who is going to be sharing a topic that I know is really fascinating. I'm definitely really fascinated and interested to learn more about these this knowing field and unlocking potential through healing family traumas, this lineage. This word constellation is going to be popping in. And by the way, if you have any questions throughout this interview, feel free to add them into the comments. You can either give StreamYard access to share your name, or it will just say Facebook user, no problem. But if you do have a question, feel free to ask, because we are here with Tanya, the expert in this field, and she will be able to answer your questions, right, Tanya?
Yeah. And it's just, if I could correct you, it's Tanya, but that's
It's
okay.
Tanya.
I think
Tanya, I am
made
so
mistake.
sorry.
All right. It's okay.
I literally have a cousin, and it's the same name, different pronunciation.
Yeah.
And I always stumble before I say it because I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna get it wrong. I'm gonna get it wrong." Of course, I get it wrong.
It's totally fine. It's so funny. My grandmother called me Tanya my whole life, like could not change. So it's okay.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
Well,
yeah, sorry.
thank you. Thank you for your understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, repeat the question if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I was just saying how, first of all, this topic of family constellations, the knowing field, accessing healing through this methodology is really fascinating to me. And I know a lot of women in my community are really interested in healing these money wounds, this generational trauma that's been carried on from generation to generations. And so, you know, I think maybe we should start off with the broader question, which is like, what is this knowing field? What is
Yeah.
this constellation you talk about?
Yeah. So the knowing field is simply, it's just another word for, it's called many names: unified field of consciousness, the quantum field, Akashic records, maybe even.
Mhm.
It's everything that has ever happened, that and future potentials, like it's all here, right? It's all here in the now moment. And just because something has happened in the past doesn't mean that it's forgotten. So anything that has happened in the past is recorded, is held within this field of consciousness. And so when there is a way to access it so that you can actually receive the information about the truth of what's held in your lineage. So it's a very experiential sort of process. And all I can say about it is my experience has been, it's really uncanny how accurate, when someone comes to me and says, I want to work on my relationship. If we're going to talking about money, I want to work on my relationship with money. Um, and I don't really ask them to go into the story. Simply ask them some facts, like, okay, well, tell me, tell me a little bit about your mother, your father, where are they from, like their parents, just really basic facts. And then once you tap in just through your intention and kind of open yourself up as a channel, essentially, um, when I practice, I'll get images, I'll get feelings, sensations in my body as I tap into each of the members of their family. And so the knowing field kind of like guides the energy of, like, okay, well, what do we need to bring in? What person do we need to see where this block is coming from? And as I'm speaking and sharing
Mm.
information that's coming through, often, 98% of the time, the client will say, "Oh my gosh, that's spot on, that's spot on. Yes, that's totally my mother. Yes, my grandmother was totally that way." It's really interesting, and um, it's not something that it doesn't require, like, a special like, you have to be special or, a natural born healer or even a psychic. I've seen regular everyday people, um, who've never done family constellations come to a workshop, and that's another way of doing it is as a workshop, come in and are able to access what's going on. And so when this information starts to come through, we're able to see, okay, this is where it like most of the stuff that happens to us didn't start with us. So if we're struggling in money or struggling in relationships, it didn't start with you. It started maybe with your mother, your great grandmother, or somewhere there's been these traumas, there's been these disorders in the order of love, and by being able to track and see what the truth is, then we can start to bring in the healing and we can basically give back the things that don't belong to us back to our ancestors, and to acknowledge them and to thank them and to honor them. And it's a very organic, spontaneous sort of process, and it's not cookie cutter. It's like one constellation is going to look extremely different from somebody else's, and where we go in the constellation is going to be very different. And so you really have to be open to the unknown, um, and just trusting that what comes through is what is meant for you to receive.
Okay, you said a lot there, and there's so many more questions that are just popping off in my mind. And first of all, I want to know you mentioned your experience with this. How did you get into this? What was your experience? How did it, you know, help you? Did you go through some healing process? Was there some trauma release? Like, I'm really curious about how you got into this.
Yeah. So the way I got into it was, gosh, maybe 13 years ago, and or maybe even more, yeah, about 13 years ago. And there was just a demonstration, a free family constellation demonstration. My friends told me you should come, and I thought, okay, I know nothing about it. And the constellator was basically said, okay, who wants to receive? I'll pick one person. So I just shot my hand up, and so she picked me. And I basically just said, I've been struggling with all these health issues. Like, I'm always fatigued. I've had heavy metal poisoning. I've had like all this stuff happen to me in my life. I don't know what's up with that. Why? Why am I still struggling with this? That's all I said to her. And so we started out with, um, so I got to choose representatives. I chose someone to represent me that was in the group. I chose another person to be my mother, another to be my father, another to be my brother. And so we started there. And as it unfolded, and what was interesting was that my mother was actually there at the workshop, which was also, a coincidence.
Mm.
So as the facilitator was constellating, she just had the intuition to bring in, she says, "There are 2 dead babies here." And so, turns out, she said, so she brought in someone to represent a child that was miscarried before me and a child that was miscarried after my brother. Now, I knew nothing. If my mother hadn't been there, I wouldn't have known whether or not this was true. But because she was there, the constellator asked, "Well, is this correct? Is this accurate?" And my mother said, "Yes, there were 2 miscarriages." So I was like, "Whoa, this is wild." How was she able to tap into that? So in my case, I always thought I was the firstborn. I always thought I was the oldest, and that's actually very, it's significant. There's an order, like the firstborn, secondborn, etc. There's certain responsibilities and themes that come with each sibling. And So for me, my whole life, I was thinking I was the oldest when I actually wasn't. Anyway, then we went further back into the lineage, like 7 generations, and clearly there was a lot of trauma. In fact, one woman who stepped in as like, yeah, I don't know, 4th generational grandmother or something, she felt so suddenly so ill that she couldn't stay in the constellation. So this constellation was, like, pretty heavy and intense, and I went in it just going like, "I don't know. Can you help me out with my fatigue and my health issues I've had?" So I'm watching all of this unfold. You're just watching it. And then at the end, she had me then, the person that was representing me, she had her sit down, and then I stepped in. So once the constellation was somewhat resolved, it kinda came to this moment of like, "Okay, it's now in alignment. We've we've brought out everything that needs to be seen and the truth." When I stepped in, my whole body, I began to shake. I could not stop shaking. Like, I shook and I just wept. And it was so, like, this unbelievable burden was lifted, or I mean, it was just so intense, and it blew my mind. I mean, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and because it was so powerful and really telling about how the subconscious is so deep, and we don't know really what it is that we're carrying until we open those windows and allow ourselves to really see and feel what needs to be seen and felt. And so yeah, and then years later I just finally I'd always wanted to learn, and I found someone that was offering to train me, and that was it. So that's
So
my story.
that's such a powerful story. I could only imagine how you were feeling, not knowing anything going into this, and then feeling like you had this big weight lifted off your shoulders. I'm curious, did you get any, I mean, obviously you got exactly what you needed to receive in that moment. You went in there asking the question about your health and your fatigue.
Yeah,
Maybe it was addressed in that you were, a weight was lifted from your shoulders.
yeah.
Did you feel like you had gotten what you went for, but it was so much more? It was more
Well, it
than
was
you
so much
asked for.
more. I think it certainly explained why I, had such, um, I had a really big health crisis in my 20s. I mean, it was scary. It was one of those months like, "Am I dying?" type of thing. Like, just all kinds of symptoms that came on suddenly, and, that I had spent a lot of time and energy trying to heal. And so it's had been a really long healing journey. And so yeah, my question was like, why am I still struggling with this? And so the answer was revealed in the sense that, oh, okay, like there's so much trauma in my lineage that my body was just kinda overwhelmed. There was almost like there was no more, it didn't have any room to carry anything more, like, and so it was, going through this healing crisis. Um, and I think for me, it really just kinda brought a sense of peace and ability to let go. Oh, there we are, sorry. Okay, just jumped off for a second. Um Yeah, there's layers. It's not like, I mean, certainly one constellation could be extremely powerful. They say to receive a constellation is like getting, 10 therapy sessions with a counselor, for example.
I'm
You
fascinated by it, and I'm still very curious to experience this for myself. And I know that at some point in time, I'm going to be reaching out to you. Go, okay, now is the time. Now is the time. Like I said to you before, because you know, I think as we are waking up to our becoming more aware
Yeah.
of the dynamics that are at play in our life, the reasons why we behave the way we behave, tapping into subconscious mind. Um, you
Mhm.
know, a lot of us are waking up and understanding that we can heal, we can change. And then from there, there's even another level of ascension. But I'm curious to know, what are the signs of ancestral trauma? What are some of those indicators that someone might be experiencing or suffering from,
Mhm. Yeah.
afflicted with ancestral trauma?
Yeah, I would say anything that seems to be, something that you can't shake, for example. Um, let's say it's just, um, let's say it's, a repetitive rep issues that keep coming up in relationships, for example. Or maybe, there's this you notice that you keep self-sabotaging and you don't know why. Anything that just seems really stuck and just like the pattern just keeps happening over and over again, um, is this indicator that, okay, there's something more here. It's not just you. It's not just because you have some issue or some emotional problem that you got to work through. It's like, no, it's deeper than that. And so things like, and the things that can really uh, get passed down are situations where, let's say, in the family, somewhere in the family, there was a death in the family, or like in my case, there were two children that weren't really properly grieved. For my mother, it was like, oh, it was just a miscarriage, like it happens. you know to her, there wasn't a connection. But the reality is like, there is, like, so when there's a family member, whether they were stillborn or they died young, or things like that, they if their death is not grieved properly, if they're not acknowledged, what happens is then we inherit that, because that we need to acknowledge them. We need to acknowledge that they did exist and that they were loved, and that we thank them for being, our ancestor. Um, and other things too, like, even, I mean, as dark as something like murder or incest, or war, or having been ostracized, members that get ostracized. These kind of things can really, um, they're fragmentation. So there's this flow, there's this order of love that comes through, and though that love gets blocked whenever there's these things that happened. It's like siphoned off and siphoned off, and so love has to flow, right? Consciousness is always expanding, it's always illuminating. And so, here we are as the descendants. We're part of that forward moving, like, consciousness expanding. And so these things, it's like things come up because it needs to be healed. Something needs to be, fully, um, and so through family constellations, we're able to tap into those much deeper layers. And so, yeah, I mean, just pointing to what you said about, uh, this idea that we're all, well, not an idea, it's the reality that we're all waking up. We're realizing, oh, we're more than just these physical bodies. We're more than, just this one lifetime. Even we're multidimensional. Um, we're everything. Ultimately, right? so um, so yeah, I would say that, the signs of the ancestral trauma is just anything, chronic illness, that's another thing, that can be a symptom. So anything that's long-standing and feels really, really stuck, that you just seem to can't break through.
I'm really curious about addiction. because I know a lot of people suffer from addiction. Addiction runs in my family. And I'm wondering, have you ever dealt with anyone who, has suffered from addiction, recovered from addiction, wanting to understand, the constellation behind it? And
Mhm.
have you ever worked with anyone regarding
I've
addiction?
I've never had anybody who was an addict come to me directly, but I did have a mother come to me because she was, in an extreme amount of grief because her young 20 something year old had fallen into using meth, and was definitely very addicted. And so she came to receive constellation, and what was really so powerful, to for me to witness is that even though the constellation was ultimately for her to be able to find peace, right?
Mm,
It wasn't, but, we did bring in her son, and, what we were able to track was this. He was the youngest, and so he was always trying to, like, prove himself, and he had some rebelliousness, and, didn't he had some resistance to being, the youngest and the little one, so he was always trying to, prove his self-worth. And then there was some kind of connection between him and the grandfather. The grandfather was, I believe, an alcoholic, if I remember right. And so the youngest had a really strong connection to the grandfather. Um, and honestly, when I do a constellation, I don't remember all the details. It's just,
mm.
the energy is just streaming through, and I often just let it go after because I don't wanna carry it myself. But, it was a really profound experience. And then 2 I think it was about a week or 2 later, so she had been struggling of really reaching and getting in touch with her son to get him to get help. And 2 weeks after that constellation, she said that her son had reached out to her and said that he was ready to go into rehab. And since then, the whole family's been going through recovery, and things have been moving along really well, and he's getting help. And so, even though that's the power of constellations, that even though you yourself are the one that's receiving it, the ripple effect of the healing can actually go out further than just for your own individual self. Like, if it's meant to, it will shift the field such that, the healing just goes out further. So it's amazing. Yeah, it was profound.
This is really, really powerful stuff here because, like you said, you could go into this experience and you can literally help other people without you even having the intention of helping them, without them even knowing that,
Yeah.
you're participating in this thing, which is, the knowing field, which connects us all. That's just so fascinating. I'm relatively new to family constellations. And it was interesting because when we started talking about this, I had a memory of seeing this thing on TV, which I had never seen before. I was so intrigued and curious by what was going on. I'd never seen anything like this before. Representatives, and you step in for the mom, you step in for the dad, and I'm thinking, what is happening here? But I was so fascinated at what was unfolding. I was glued, like I could not walk away. And then, this process takes a while, and it must take a lot out of you energetically.
It
It
can. I mean, it can. It's definitely. I really have to keep my own vessel, like, you know,
mm,
my physical body, I take really good care of it, and I rest when I need to, and, and I don't do, a bunch of constellations one after the other, like, to space them out. Because yeah, it can be it can be a lot. Um but yet at the same time, it's so rewarding. I mean, the transformation that I see that comes through for people is the reason why I do it. That's what keeps me, keeping doing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, because I know a lot of the women in my audience are really interested in money wounds related to perhaps ancestral trauma, and they're really curious about, healing these money wounds, what that looks like, how to do it. If someone came to you and they were really interested in, you know, they think they have these money wounds, they have this relationship with money which is not harmonious, and they want to improve it, they want to heal whatever needs to be healed. What would you offer them? How would you walk them through this? What would it look like in
Yeah.
terms of working with you?
Mhm. So I would just start with, looking at their father and their mother. What is the relationship of money that the father carries, and what does the mother's relationship to money look like? And and then also bringing in a field of your own relationship to money, like, what is it that you want it to be? Um, and so what I you know, so and so there's all kinds of things that, of course, that can come in and sort of limit your relationship with money. I've seen, like, things like the Catholic Church, for example, like this feeling of, like, oh, to be, money is evil, or if you're spiritual, you can't earn money. They're really, really so deeply embedded, and we do inherit them from our ancestors. And so what it often looks like, so a healing sentence could be, um, and a common one is, "What is mine, what is yours? I give back to you what is yours." You have your own relationship to money, and I choose mine. I'm choosing to have a different relationship. Because I think there can be a lot of judgment, especially from families, if you're, like, really trying to break away to create your own relationship. And when we try to break out of those family and ancestral patterns, we can get a lot of backlash, right? And a lot of judgment. And so it does take a certain amount of strength to really get clear and just be like, really to stand in your own autonomy. And the thing of it is, where people get stuck is that we don't I think maybe the way a lot of people respond to these sort of things is like, okay, no, I'm just going to reject my parents, let's say, for example. Well, when you reject them, you are cutting off uh, um, the flow of love to you. um, and so there is a way to, even, let's say that you don't have a good relationship with your parents, and let's say, they were extremely abusive, or, whatever it is, doesn't mean that you have to forgive them. That's not something that we do in family constellations. There isn't this forgiveness work. It's more about, being able to hear from the parents, like, I'm sorry, I did do this to you. I did abuse you, and I'm sorry for that. And I take back what is mine, you know, leave it with me. These sentences have a real impact on the energetic body. And so there's something that happens, I think, in the subconscious when we're hearing those sentences and we're seeing it happen as though it was happening in the present moment. Something then shifts. Um, and so even if our parents, let's say, had a horrible relationship with money, let's say they were gamblers or something, right? And they gambled away the family's money. There's a lot of reason for you to, like, really be angry at your parents. But ultimately, if we can separate all of these things out and realize, okay, that belongs to them, it doesn't belong to me. And at the core of it all, even if my parents were really abusive, I can still honor them as my parents and thank them for giving me life.
Mm,
Without them, you wouldn't be alive.
mm,
So that's really, like, to know that and to accept that can be really liberating.
yeah.
And so we're not having to carry this anger, and that definitely blocks abundance, right? When we're carrying a chip on our shoulder, we can still be grateful that they gave us life. And so, yeah, there's so many different layers, but that's an example of what it might look like.
That's a great example. And I'm curious, like, if a person wants to do this work and is it like a one-time thing? Does it require multiple sessions? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I've had people that just come for one session and, they really receive what they need to receive. For some people, there's just, several layers that need to be worked through. So they'll book several sessions. And and it's one of those things that family constellations isn't something that you would need to do, let's say, like, once a week, like a typical
Mhm.
therapist would see you once a week, and you would go meet them for an hour, because it's a lot to digest. This little healing's happening at a soul level, and so it's working in all these layers, and so to give yourself time to just really kinda digest and then realize, "Okay, I'm working through this, and noticing what shifts and changes," and then usually, like, okay, the next layer then comes up, and you're like, "Okay, now I need to work on this." But I do offer, just one-off sessions, and then I do also like a 3-month program where you get a constellation every other week, and we dive into all different areas. There's really no topic that is untouchable. That's the coolest thing about it, is that really there's no topic that we can't dive into. There's nothing that is, yeah.
It's
Um,
all on the table. I love that. And you just let it unfold organically, right? Like wherever it goes. Have
yeah.
you have you ever been really either surprised at what's coming forward or uncomfortable with what's coming forward? Like, oh, I've never seen this before, or this is deep, this is dark, this is heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you handle that as a healer? Like I'm thinking that requires a lot of something.
A lot of something, I mean, I will say, like, I'm a quintuple Scorpio, so I think that's my advantage. Like, I can go into the dark. There's really not that much that phases me anymore. That I feel like I've seen it all. But, for me, it's not that it impacts me so much. It's just more about creating that deep level of trust for the client. Like, you know what? There's nothing too shameful to look at, or nothing that's too taboo. I mean, because, yeah, I have dealt with clients where there's incest, for example, or, yeah, or, rape, or, all these different things. And, I mean, I don't know. I guess for myself, I've just, it's kind of like, if you've gone through a lot of trauma yourself and come out the other side, you just have a capacity to hold more,
Mm,
for others, right? Like, you can tell when you're with somebody that really hasn't maybe had to have, that hasn't had much struggle in their life, right?
mm,
So there's a
mm.
difference. And so I think that ultimately is the gift of, and I'm just speaking this to anyone out there that's carrying trauma, to know, like, there is a gift. And I know that's hard to maybe hear sometimes, especially when you're in it and you're like, you're really struggling with it, but there is a gift. Everything in life is a gift. And
Mm.
so we can receive that. It's such There's such power there.
Wow. That message, those words, I know are landing with some people right now.
Yeah.
Really, really powerful. Talk to me about this new world, new earth
Mm.
consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, That is something that so before I got into family constellations, I was really into energy healing and learning about the power of sacred geometry, and, um, I've kind of studied a little bit of, Michelle Wright's work, which is Paralandra, is her company. She works with essences, and it's all about co-creating with Earth. So, New Earth consciousness to me is this awakening that eventually we're all going to be living in this new awareness, new consciousness where we really finally remember in our bones that we are connected with the earth and that we are co-creating with her, that everything is alive, everything is awake, um, that we're not separate from each other, we're not separate from the planet. And for me, I just hold this vision of the future that as we go through this really, seemingly rocky, difficult time in humanity, that we'll come out the other side where all of our technology is coming from a place that understands wholeness, that understands that we have to work with um, the natural and that we have a much deeper understanding of who we really are. So, how we raise our children, how we educate, how we grow our food, how we run our businesses, that it's uh, there's so much that then positivity that could come out of that. So New Earth consciousness to me is that I think that's the direction that we're moving. I think at least I'm holding that vision, and that even though I think it's there seems to be all this bad news out there. What I am noticing and feeling is that there is this undercurrent. There's this knowing that people are waking up to that there's more, and we can be more, and we can do better, um,
We can heal.
and we can heal. We can experience. We can miracles could become commonplace, right? Yeah.
Miracles and magic. That's what
Right.
I'm about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm just curious about this new Earth consciousness and what your thoughts are on the children that are growing up in this time of the Great Awakening. Like,
Yeah.
what is your perception of the children that are growing up into this?
Yeah, they're so different. They're so different. I mean, I can speak to the fact that, when I was so my background is also in education. So I have I'm a Waldorf teacher as well, or have been. And when I started teaching, I just remember that experience of looking at these kids and how they are. I'm like, they are different. They are so much more awake and so much more aware. I mean, they have so much potential. Like, what I find really fascinating is, like, even now, a lot of young people are, kind of like turning off their phones. They're rejecting technology, the negative aspects of technology, um, and so and I see it all the time. Of course, with the young children, they'll just say things, and you're just like, whoa, that is so deep. Like, who are you? Like, where did you come from? Like, that is something that you would hear maybe a Buddhist monk say, those kind of things. Um, yeah. So they are definitely the future, and they definitely need our support. And I think, our role as the older generation is to really just hold the container for them, like, let them fly. Like,
Oh,
let them fly. Let them unfold naturally from the inside out. And so, yeah.
it's so exciting. I know I was given a picture from my niece. My niece colored me a picture. It was a princess. And I I was so incredibly in awe of how she colored it because she literally colored this princess's face and hands brown. And I had never seen that before. Like,
Yeah.
she's a little white girl, and she just colored the skin brown, like, you know what I mean? And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am so excited for this next generation." Like, that
Yeah.
is like, you know?
Yeah, it's so wild. I mean, I remember even my son, he did like a self-portrait, I remember it was like yeah, he did this self-portrait and there was this eye, and inside the eye were these it looked like letters, but from a different alphabet, like, it was and so when I saw that, I'm like, "I've seen that," like, I see people do that, like, they call it light language or, whatever, like, it's so interesting, and it's like, where does that come from? Like, they're from the stars, they really are. It's
Oh
incredible.
my gosh, it really is. This conversation has been so enlightening. It's expanded my mind even more to family constellations, the knowing field, and, being able to access your highest potential. How can our viewers, anyone who's watching this and is feeling the pull from within to dive into this, to maybe unlock their highest potential through this practice, how can they reach you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah. So the easiest way is just to message me on Facebook,
Mm.
Tanya Elena, or to go to my website, which is newearthconsciousness.com. It's very easy to contact me that way. And yeah, and I'll get back with you. And so
Mm.
you can check out what my offers are on my website. And but yeah, happy to have free chat.
Oh my gosh.
So
I was supposed to say your name again, and I keep pausing because I'm
it's okay.
Tanya.
I'm
It's Tanya.
yes, you got it.
Tanya
You got
Elena. I hate making mistakes. I think oh my gosh. There are
it.
no mistakes, right? What does Bob Ross say? He says
Oh, is
something.
it let's see.
He says,
Oh, yeah,
happy.
happy little mistakes. There just have to be
Yes.
mistakes. There are no mistakes. There are no mistakes.
Oh gosh. No, no.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. And, I look forward to connecting with you at some point on this. I feel it's coming because I know there's really something there that I would love to dive into myself. I feel like it would just liberate me like you experienced when you had your family constellation. So that'll be coming soon. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for joining me. I really appreciate this. This was a really enlightening conversation.
yeah. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Mm, you're so welcome. You're so welcome.
Yeah. Much love to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.